All right, this video is going to walk you through the first part on this review and this first worksheet on the relationship between some numbers. So as a reminder, this second part of the chapter is going to be very, very, very closely related to what we did last chapter or last part of the chapter, and that was multiplying. So the first thing I wanted you to do is go through and multiply those polynomials at the top. So hopefully you went ahead and did that, and you can kind of check. Remember, in this first one, you're just distributing. In the middle one, you have to FOIL or you have to double distribute, whichever method you were working on. Same thing in the second one, you had to double distribute or FOIL if you were looking at that. And notice you're doing your like terms in the middle of both of those problems. So where does that lead us? So once we talked about the multiplying, this next worksheet actually is dealing with problems 2 and 3, and then we'll go back to problem 1 in the notes. So when we talk about problems 2 and 3, there's a relationship between these numbers here, the 28 and the 32, and the last two numbers, and then the number in the middle, 3 and negative 52, and the numbers that show up in the middle of those values. And so what is that relationship? Well, this worksheet kind of will walk you through just those relationships that we're looking for. So what happens here is we're just going to deal with plain numbers, no letters in this particular worksheet. So in each of these, you're going to be given 4 spots, and you're going to have to fill in some of those 4 spots. We're going to start out nice and easy where it gives you the 2 factors. So when we look at our 2 factors or our 2 side spots, what happens is, or the layout is, the top number is the product or the multiplying of those 2 factor numbers, and the bottom number is the sum of those 2 factor numbers. So if you take a look at the first problem, I went ahead and did that one for you. You will see that my 2 factor numbers were 5 and 7. And so they just want you to play around with the relationships with those particular things. So what is the relationship of 5 times 7? That's 35, and we put that at the top. What is the relationship of 5 plus 7? That's 12. As you go through 1 to 13, those are going to be your first example group. You'll notice each of those has a factor or 2 factors, and you need to write the product at the top and the sum at the bottom. That part's pretty easy. What you need to pay attention to are the signs, the plus or minus signs in between each of your factors. Don't forget, when you do a positive times a positive, you get a positive number. When you do a negative times a negative, you still get a positive number. If you have one of each sign, one positive, one negative, that's going to give you a negative product at the top. In addition, you need to pay attention to how you get that sum number on the bottom. Which number might be bigger? Which number might be smaller? How does that affect the sign of the sum down here? So you can go through and do 1 to 13 and kind of pause this video for a second while you fill those in. All right. So once you've done that, we're going to move on to 14 through 20. So in 14 through 20, they gave you one of the factors and either the sum or the product. It just kind of depends on the problem. So now it's kind of a little guessing game. You need to ask yourself, okay, if I had 17 and I needed to make a sum of 3, what number would I need to add to that? So 17 plus negative 14 gives me a sum of 3. And then I can go back at the end and fill in what the product of those two numbers is. So again, go through 14 to 20, see if you can figure out what the other factor is first, and then go back through and fill in either the product or the sum, whichever one is missing. And then from there, when we get to 21 to 28, these are the hardest version. Basically, they're saying, we're going to give you the product, we're going to give you the sum, and we want you to figure out what are the 2 factors and which signs are they supposed to be. Remember, signs are very important in this. So if you look at my first example of the hardest kind, you'll see in my product is negative 156 and my sum is negative 1. Because my product is negative, I know I need one negative number, one positive number, and I'm just going to play around in my calculator until I get 2 numbers that multiply to 156. That's going to be 13 and 12. The sum of 13 and 12 is negative 1. So go ahead and try to finish, pause and try to finish 21 to 28. Okay, now that you've finished all of the problems, 1 to 28, here are the answers for each of those things. If you have any wrong, you want to check those and change the correct answers for that. And think about why maybe you put the wrong number there and what that relationship should have been. Before you try to do the notes, I would make sure that you understand where all of these numbers are coming from because it's going to be very important in the second half of today's notes. So again, if you need to, pause the video so you can check all your answers. And then when you're finished, go ahead and play video number 2 for the notes.